On a freezing Los Angeles night, a homeless veteran sat shivering on the pavement, ignored by the world. When a compassionate activist stopped to help, a harsh cop intervened, sparking a tense confrontation. But just as things seemed ready to explode, a black SUV rolled up, and out stepped Snoop Dogg, living legend, ready to stand against injustice. Living legend ready to stand against injustice. But what happens next will make you speechless. Watch to the end to find out the rest of the story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about where you're watching from. Your support will help me tell more stories like this. The night was colder than usual for Los Angeles, a city known more for its endless summers than for the biting chill of winter. The streets of downtown hummed with the usual late-night bustle, a mix of neon-lit luxury and the harsh realities of poverty. Luxury cars slid effortlessly past makeshift tents, their glossy surfaces reflecting the flickering glow of boutique signs and streetlights. Amid this juxtaposition sat George, a weathered man with a face marked by deep lines that told stories of hardship and time. His frail hands clutched a cardboard sign that read, "Veteran, hungry, anything helps." George's breath curled in the icy air as he shifted uncomfortably on the cold pavement. He pulled his tattered coat tighter around him, though it did little to ward off the chill. People passed by without a glance, their hurried footsteps echoing against the buildings. To them, he was invisible, a fixture of the city they'd grown accustomed to ignoring. Across the street, Marcus Reed emerged from a small coffee shop, carrying a thermos of soup and a bag stuffed with gloves and socks. He walked with purpose, his tall frame cutting through the crowd with ease. Marcus had been here countless times before, walking these streets as part of his mission to help the homeless. But tonight, the divide between the city's opulence and its overlooked suffering felt sharper than ever. As he scanned the block, his eyes fell on George, and a familiar pang of empathy hit him. Marcus crossed the street quickly, dodging cars and ignoring the honks. He reached George just as a uniformed security guard approached. "Hey," the guard barked. "You can't stay here. This isn't a shelter." George's eyes darted upward, wide with fear. Before he could respond, Marcus stepped between them. "He's not bothering anyone," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "Leave him alone." The guard glared at Marcus, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. Marcus crouched beside George, offering him a pair of gloves and a warm smile. "How's it going, man? You staying warm?" George nodded hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Trying to. It's been rough." Marcus handed him the thermos. "This should help. It's chicken noodle." George's trembling hands accepted the gift, and for the first time that evening, a glimmer of gratitude flickered in his tired eyes. But before they could exchange more words, the crunch of heavy boots on pavement interrupted them. "Step away from him," a gruff voice commanded. Marcus turned to see a stocky police officer in his 40s, his badge gleaming under the streetlight. Officer Bradley Kane was infamous in this part of town. He had a reputation for being harsh, particularly toward the homeless. "What seems to be the problem?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but tinged with irritation. Kane's eyes narrowed. "This man's loitering on private property. He needs to move along." George shifted uncomfortably, clutching the thermos as though it were a lifeline. Marcus straightened, his height giving him a slight edge over the officer. "He's just sitting here," Marcus said. "It's freezing out. Where do you expect him to go?" Kane stepped closer, his hand resting on his belt. "That's not my problem. My job is to enforce the law." "Your job is to serve and protect," Marcus shot back. "And this isn't protecting anyone. It's bullying." A small crowd had begun to gather, their murmurs growing louder. Some pulled out their phones, recording the exchange. George looked from Marcus to Kane, his anxiety mounting as the tension thickened. Smiling, Marcus let his cell to the ground to let more crew members in. Kane's face reddened. Step aside or I'll have to take action." Marcus didn't budge. "Take action?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Against a man who's done nothing wrong? You're out here enforcing laws that criminalize survival. Is that what you're proud of?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their phones capturing every word. Kane's jaw tightened, his authority slipping under the weight of public scrutiny. And then, just as the situation seemed ready to explode, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The SUV's tinted window rolled down, and the unmistakable voice of Snoop Dogg cut through the tension. "Yo, what's going on here?" The crowd parted as Snoop stepped out, flanked by two towering security guards. Dressed in a fur-lined coat and gold chains, he exuded both swagger and authority. His presence was magnetic, drawing every eye in the crowd, including Kane's. "Sir, I'm handling a situation," Kane said, his tone faltering. "Nah, looks like you're picking on someone who can't fight back," Snoop replied, his voice calm but cutting. He crouched beside George, his expression softening. "You good, OG?" George nodded, though his voice trembled as he said, "I'm fine, thanks to him," gesturing at Marcus. Snoop turned his gaze to Kane, his eyes narrowing. "You see this?" he said, gesturing at George. "This ain't just some dude on the street. This is a man, a veteran, and you out here trying to make his life harder?" The crowd erupted in applause, emboldened by Snoop's words. Kane looked around, visibly uncomfortable. Snoop reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, handing it to George. "This ain't charity," he said, his tone firm. "This is love. Use it for whatever you need." George's hands shook as he accepted the money, his eyes welling with tears. Snoop straightened, turning back to Kane. "You think this makes you strong? Picking on the weakest out here? Man, that ain't strength. That's cowardice." The crowd's cheers grew louder, their phones capturing every moment. Kane, now visibly flustered, muttered something about policy before retreating to his patrol car. Snoop clapped a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're doing good work, man. Keep it up. And if you ever need a hand, hit me up." He slipped Marcus a card before heading back to his SUV. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus walked George to a nearby shelter, ensuring he had a warm place to sleep for the night. Along the way, George opened up about his life, the war, the struggles with PTSD, and the years of being invisible to the world. Meanwhile, Officer Kane sat in his patrol car, staring out the window. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of doubt. The words of Marcus and Snoop echoed in his mind, planting a seed he couldn't ignore. Marcus watched as George entered the shelter, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Snoop's card, running his fingers over the embossed letters. It was a reminder that even in the face of systemic injustice, moments of humanity and courage could spark change. The city lights shimmered in the distance as Marcus turned to leave, his silhouette fading into the night. In his heart he carried the weight of the fight ahead, but also the promise of a better tomorrow.